The Turtles from the IDW universe have been going through adventures in a shared multiverse for a while now. They've heard of other iterations of themselves thanks to Miyamoto Usagi and Renette, and they have even been to other dimensions with turtles in them, as seen in the second TMNT Ghostbusters miniseries. But so far, they never had to interact with their doppelgangers. That is, until the latest event from IDW Comics, where these turtles had to face their own feelings and their place in the Turtleverse. Join me today as I explore the Battle Nexus miniseries. You can technically read this story without existing knowledge about all the different universes. However, this is the type of story that feels more rewarding for those well-versed in the Turtleverse, and in particular, the IDW universe. Since the final issue of this story is not even a week old at the time of this recording, I have to give a massive spoiler warning for the entire video. You've been warned. Anyway, there are a few concepts and stories that I should talk about before jumping into this story. The Battle Nexus was first introduced during the second season of the 2003 cartoon. This world, ruled by the Daimyo, held a tournament known as the Big Brawl every 3 years. The Turtles participated in this competition, resulting in Michelangelo becoming the champion of the multiverse. The Daimyo had a powerful tool at his disposal, the War Staff. If used by an evil person, the staff could rip a hole in the fabric of space-time. Keep a mental note of all these details. The next introduction of the Battle Nexus was in the pages of TMNT Volume 4, published by Mirage Comics. In that story, Leonardo discovered the nexus between realities while following the lead of a strange race of warriors. During this experience, he met Oroku Yoshi, a man who looked a little too much like the Shredder. He was about to meet with the daimyo of this land, someone who looked a little too much like his late master Splinter. Given the existence of parallel realities, meeting duplicates was always a possibility. Unfortunately, meeting your duplicate could have unpredictable results, with the twins often attacking or even killing each other. This story is unfinished, at least at the time of this recording. The following introduction appeared in the 2014 annual of IDW Comics. This was the first adventure Renette had with these turtles, at least from their perspective. Renette took the turtles to the Battle Nexus, an asteroid located outside of space and time, where warriors across the cosmos were kidnapped and forced to fight under the rule of the Dimensional Council. They'd put on these games every 12 cycles. With the help of a warrior named Baltazar, the Turtles helped Renette stop the games and council leader Nieli. As a result, the remaining 4 council members, under the supervision of Time Master Lord Simultaneous, cleaned up their act and began hosting a voluntary tournament every 12 cycles. A few years later, the Battle Nexus was introduced in Rise of the TMNT. This time, the tournament was ruled by Big Mama and was an essential piece of how the Turtles came to be. However, this Battle Nexus was less of a place between realities and more of a stadium inside the Hidden City, a mystical underground realm where humans and yokai fought each other for sport. The last stop before the main story of this video was known as the Oglympics. It took place in the pages of Saturday Morning Adventures, where Mr. Og, an interdimensional imp, pitted the turtles against other versions of themselves. Or at least, that's what they thought at first, as it was later revealed they were fighting nightmarish versions of those turtles. Og did pit the 1987 turtles against enemies throughout their history, including Tiger Claw. While the turtles couldn't remember this story, it was established that Mr. Og had enough power to create his own interdimensional competition. But this story takes place in the IDW version of the Battle Nexus, where the Dimensional Council had been recruiting champions for the now legitimate tournament. I already mentioned Lord Simultaneous, a Time Lord from the 79th dimension of Null Time. The Time Lords had previously banished one of their own, a rogue Time Lord known as Savanti Romero. He was banished for an eternity to a limbo without time or energy. During this eternity, all that Savanti could think about was taking his revenge on his enemies, his mentor, Lord Simultaneous, Renette, and the Turtles. Any Turtles, actually, since he had to fight against the Mirage and IDW sets. But one day, for reasons that remained unexplained, a fissure opened that facilitated his escape. He learned about the Battle Nexus and put a plan for revenge in motion to seize it. Needing champions by his side, he visited the world of Shenkir, which was the home of a race of anthropomorphic foxes. This was the land of Umeko of the Gnawed Forest. She was the greatest warrior in the Ninjara clan, and after learning a prophecy about her destiny, she went seeking to possess the Black Blade, a weapon forged from the night itself. She would one day use this sword of shadow to cut down a monstrous beast. To her surprise, her destined prey showed up there, Savanti Romero. Savanti nicknamed her Ninjara, as it would make a great ring name. Umeko took the blade to fulfill her destiny, but that was when Savanti revealed to her that the blade had a curse. She was doomed to wield that weapon for her master. Knowing that Umeko's people believed their souls were kept inside their tails, he used an immobility spell on her and severed her tail, effectively making her his slave as long as he had it with him. Back in IDW's New York, the Turtles were fighting Bebop and Rocksteady. It hadn't been long since the Turtles got back together and saved New York from the oppressive forces of the Foot. Bebop and Rocksteady were simply trying to enforce a protection racket as a side business. But this confrontation got cut short by the sudden appearance of a time fissure that captured the four Turtles. Upon arrival, the Turtles were met by Ninjara, who pressured them into voluntarily dropping their weapons. The Turtles fought back, not knowing how effective a warrior Umeko was. This fight was cut short by Savanti Romero, who revealed himself to be in control of the Battle Nexus and holding the 5 members of the Dimensional Council and Renette hostage. He also had a champion for each turtle to face. One of them was Slash, whom Michelangelo considered a brother, and they all sadly saw him heroically explode after Agent Bishop implanted a nuclear bomb inside of him. However, during that blast, a time fissure was created, sending Slash through time and space into the Battle Nexus. It's implied that someone used a blend of science and magic to heal him and make him join the competition. Slash had healed physically, but he barely talked or remembered anything. In fact, he was only a violent force of nature, losing himself in combat over a very long period. That is, until Savanti found him and recruited him. Savanti was now the user of his own time scepter, a scepter that was also a weapon, as it was also the War Staff. Unfortunately, since he was using dark energy to fuel it, he was also playing with the integrity of the multiverse. For the first match, Savanti isolated Leonardo and then revealed the first champion, the original Shredder, who was taken just before his death. Leonardo was surprised by the nature of this Shredder, who seemed to know so much about him before even fighting. After failing on his approach, much like the original Leonardo, he realized that the advantage against Saki was in fighting at a distance. This increased his chances of success, but Savanti knew what he was doing and took one of Leo's swords, giving it to Shredder. Shredder explained that Savanti chose him as his champion simply because of how much he hated the Turtles. Leonardo tried rushing Shredder into combat, but it ended badly for him. Leo seemed impaled by the sword, and his body immediately vanished. This sudden change of the rules was too much for the daimyo, who was revealed to be a member of the Dimensional Council. Savanti attacked him with the War Staff to shut him up. Enraged, Raphael broke his ties and tried to attack the Shredder, who also vanished. With no one else to fight, Raph tried to attack Savanti, who was stopped by Ninjara, who threw him back into the arena. Seeing Ninjara defeat Raphael gave Savanti an idea for the following match. Savanti threw the Turtles into the barracks, where they met an older turtle covered with a hood and a cape. He'd been there for a while and had witnessed many matches between turtles from different realities. All were forced to fight Savanti's champions. Unfortunately, this old turtle was very pessimistic about the tournament's outcome and had no hope of them defeating Savanti Romero. Many other champions were at Savanti's disposal. Fighters like Archie's Crying Hound, Rise's Ghost Bear, Archie's Man Moth, Mirage's Jarut, a Triceraton, 2012's Pizza Face, 2003's Aya, 2003's Sickle, and 2003's Stonebiter. No turtle stepped into the arena and won so far. They all disappeared after losing, banished by the war staff. Raphael was then relocated to the arena, where he had to face the next champion, his ex, Alopix. Raphael refused to fight Alopix, who didn't even know why she was there. She had left New York expecting to keep Raphael out of her life, so she had many pent-up negative feelings against him. She never forgave Raph for teaming up with Oroku Saki. Raphael admitted his mistake, mostly because he hated himself after seeing how it hurt her. He could have listened to Alopix's concerns and come up with a different plan, but he didn't. This was a betrayal by someone considered part of their clan. This wasn't enough for Alopix. While Saki killed his family in the past, they eventually returned from the dead. But in her case, he burned her home, brainwashed her, and enslaved her. So this betrayal stung even more. She felt betrayed by the people she loved. Seeing that apologies weren't getting him anywhere, Raphael decided he was done apologizing and started fighting back. The two found the match a stalemate and eventually grew tired and started laughing at the ridiculous situation. This infuriated Savanti, who sent both of them into the prison dimension. After thinking about it a bit longer, he decided it was best to separate the lovebirds, and he sent Alopix to the barracks with the other turtles. The remaining members of the Dimensional Council objected once again after seeing Savanti break his own rules. The black and white member complained first, because only a losing fighter was supposed to be eliminated. But when the one next to him also complained, Savanti used the war staff to shut her up. This was when it was revealed that Big Mama was a member of the Dimensional Council. It was clear that since Savanti made the rules, he was also allowed to break them. Donatello was the next in line to fight, but he had already figured out who his opponent would be. Savanti had picked highly skilled champions with emotional relevance and unresolved personal ties to them. He correctly guessed that Mikey would be pitted against Slash later as well. Therefore, he was surprised that Savanti would go for such an obvious choice, Metalhead. But this wasn't the IDW Metalhead Donnie had experience with. This one came from some point in the 2012 timeline and was given a different programming by Savanti to become his champion. Since then, he has been pitted against other opponents such as 1987's Super Rocksteady, 2003's Turtlebot, Playmates Half Court, Archie's Murdude, and 1987's Muckman and Joe Eyeball. To Donnie, there was no point in fighting Metalhead, because it was probably built by another Donatello and could therefore predict all his movements. Understanding Donnie's fears of an imbalanced fight, Savanti ordered Metalhead to lower his defenses, against the advice of the original Shredder. Donnie took advantage of this, and after a quick fight, he found the factory reset button on the robot's head, ending the match. Furious, Savanti sent both Donnie and Metalhead to the prison dimension. This caused yet another outrage among the members of the Dimensional Council. One of them even told him that it was because of stuff like this he was never invited into the Saturday Morning Adventures comic. Savanti attacked this council member in the face, revealing it was Mr. Og, something he complained about because he needed to look his best for the backup feature. More on that later. Upon arrival in the prison dimension, Donnie was received by Raph and Leo, plus Rise's Donnie, 2003's Leo, and Archie's Raphael. Since Rise's Donnie still had his tech with him, he was able to figure out they were at a confluence spot of temporal waste from all realities. 2003's Leo explained that when he arrived there, he met the original Leonardo, who was also a veteran of the Battle Nexus tournament. During his adventures there, he learned that proximity to your doppelganger was incredibly dangerous and could lead to violence, madness, and fates worse than death. In other words, Savanti sent them there so they would go crazy and kill each other. The three turtles volunteered to stay behind to warn the next wave, but at a cost. It had become harder to remember life before they arrived there. Despite the imminent threat, IDW's Leo decided to spend some time with these turtles. Donnie also saw this as an excellent opportunity to pick another Donatello's brain, and the two Raphaels saw it as an opportunity to spar with another Raph. IDW's Leo noticed a sigil inscribed on a rock that he recognized from the barracks. 2003's Leo carved it there, but couldn't remember why or what it meant. The two Leos then compared notes on their philosophies. The two Raphaels talked about romance, implying that this was early in Raph and Ninjara's relationship, very likely during issue 37 of that run, which was the last time the Turtles wore their intergalactic wrestling suits. The Donnies talked specifically about Metalhead. IDW's Donnie felt jealous of whoever built this one, mostly because he had been going through a few life-and-death experiences that left him a bit foggy. Rise's Donnie then made some observations about things he should feel proud about. He beat Savanti at his own game, which was something no other turtle had accomplished before. Perhaps thanks to his unpredictable oscillations between mysticism and technology. Also, he was looking forward to stealing the tech in this Metalhead to upgrade his Sheldon. But it was clear that, despite all their wisdom, these turtles were starting to forget what mattered to them. With this added pressure, IDW's Leo felt compelled to join forces to find a way out. The Donnies realized that the War Staff was of a techno-sorcery nature. Savanti was powering the staff with a dark energy, but it was still technology they could replicate. All they had to do was create a new one and wait for Savanti to send another turtle there to use the lingering dark energy to power it and send them back to the Battle Nexus. But they still needed some super serious sophisticated equipment, and that was how they used Metalhead to create their new scepter. Back at the Battle Nexus, Savanti rejected Saki's proposal to end the competition early and let him kill the rest. Stubborn, Savanti began the next match between Michelangelo and Slash, a match Mikey refused to fight, as he was not willing to lose his friend again. Slash didn't share the same feelings for Mikey, whom he didn't seem to remember, so he started beating Mikey up anyway. Renette tried to warn Savanti once more about the effects the War Staff was having around them, and pointed out that a storm was brewing right above them. This storm could potentially destroy the entire multiverse. But Savanti was never a big fan of self-preservation, and tired of her yapping, sent her to the prison dimension. He was also not satisfied with the ongoing match. Mikey's refusal to fight was making a mockery of his Battle Nexus. And what irked him the most was that it wasn't the tactician, the genius, or the brawler causing it, but the one he considered the clown. Mikey still managed to make a fool out of Savanti, which made the council laugh and Savanti mad. He attacked Mikey with the War Staff, and when he asked for his final words, Mikey told Slash that no matter what happened, he would always be his brother, something that seemed to have clicked with Slash. Feeling pride and honor again, Slash attacked Savanti, and just when it looked like Savanti was about to kill Slash, a fissure opened with the survivors from the prison dimension, carrying the new scepter. Seeing how the presence of another scepter made it too dangerous to get into a fight with them, Savanti unleashed a horde of Bebops and Rocksteadies from an alternate universe that one day I should talk about. But they weren't completely alone. Alopex and a now hopeful old man Mikey escaped from the barracks and joined the fight. Renette was also back after helping the Turtles build the new scepter. She freed the Dimensional Council members, then entered the arena to retrieve the War Staff. This was the perfect opportunity for a rematch between IDW's Leo and the original Shredder. This time, Leo defeated him and warned him that death was never the end. No Shredder would ever truly beat any of them, and he would have to live with that knowledge for the rest of his short life. As you might expect, the appearance of a horde of bebops and rocksteadies was too chaotic, even for Savanti Romero. Alopex pretended to attack him, but was stopped by Ninjara. This was just a distraction so that Raphael could steal Umeko's tail back. Since this was the only thing keeping her under his control, Umeko immediately decapitated her former master. Savanti's head fell on Archie's Raph's hands, who now had hearts in his eyes. Since Umeko's tail was now in Raphael's control, she told him she was his to command. But IDW's Raphael simply returned the tail to her. True to her nature, Renette tripped with the War Staff on her way back to Lord Simultaneous. As a result, it broke and opened a fissure that started sucking everything like a vacuum. It took all the bebops and rocksteadies, the original Shredder, and even Savanti's head. Lord Simultaneous created a temporary time bubble to shield them, but without a powered-up time scepter, they were all stranded. That was when Umeko told them they could escape to their homes with their world's sigil. After carving the sigil, they all escaped back to their worlds, including the Dimensional Council members. Big Mama promised that all the turtles still marooned in Limbo would be returned to their proper universes at the precise instant they were taken from. But the Battle Nexus couldn't be saved. On their way out, the remaining Black and White Council member said he knew that the bonds of brotherhood would put an end to Savanti. After revealing he was Splinter, he said he couldn't be prouder of their actions if they had been his own sons. After this adventure was over, Renette was put to work fixing the fissure at the Battle Nexus world. Lord Simultaneous, on the other hand, had to find ways to restore that world before the next tournament. Back on the IDW world, the Turtles, Slash and Alopex were back. Slash was feeling guilty about all the violence he unleashed in the tournament, so Mikey encouraged him not to think too much about it. Alopex and Raphael were on good terms now, and were willing to resume their relationship. And finally, Leo expressed how proud he was of Donnie after saving all of them, especially after the tough year he just had. But Umeko also crossed into this universe, roaming free through New York, and we will surely see her again. As I mentioned earlier, Mr. Ogg had a backup feature in each issue. It was just one page, so these were mostly made for comedy. However, if you were expecting sets of turtles from different universes fighting each other, this was it. Mr. Ogg wasn't happy about Savanti co-opting the Battle Nexus for himself. So he saw this as a good opportunity to have some fun, pitting his favorite turtle iterations against each other. In the introduction, he gathered most of the Raphael versions, plus the Last Ronin, whom he brought in just because he was highly marketable. Ogg explained that he could be in both stories at once, thanks to the warping of time and space. The first match was between the first movie and the Mutant Mayhem Turtles. The rules were that the first turtles to get pinned would get their team out of the Battle Nexus. But these two sets of teens were very different, and many questions got in the way of the fight, like music preferences, school life, and who gave Mikey braces. Mutant Mayhem's Mikey got distracted by the question, and the live-action turtles won the match. The following match was between the original Turtles and the Mystic-powered Rise Turtles. Knowing they had a disadvantage, the original Turtles used smoke to operate in the dark. This left the Rise Turtles at a disadvantage. The original Turtles took Rise's Leo's Mystic Swords, and after he got desperate to get them back, he tripped on the original Leo's foot and fell, essentially losing the match. The next fight was between the Saturday Morning Adventures Turtles and the Archie Intergalactic Wrestling Turtles. After a few snarky comments at each other, 87's Donnie and Archie's Mikey pinned Archie's Leo and 87's Raph, respectively. Seeing this as a tie, Archie's Raph and 87's Leo ended up playing checkers to determine the winner. The final match was between the 2003 and 2012 Turtles. Mikey even wore his Turtle Titan suit in the ring. But 2012's Mikey had a secret weapon, Ice Cream Kitty. He made the ring's surface so slippery that she ended up defeating all of the Turtles. Therefore, Mr. Ogg declared Ice Cream Kitty the tournament winner and promised a future installment. Battle Nexus was an event that had been in the making for at least 3 years. It started as a different multi-dimensional event, centered around one character, back when Charles Beecham was the editor of the Turtle books. According to Eric Burnham, that multi-dimensional event was the reason he had to get creative in the Ogg Olympics to avoid officially crossing over different iterations of the Turtles. Tom Waltz, who was working on the Armageddon game and Rodinverse at the time, also got involved with this story, even after Beecham's departure and the arrival of new editor Andy Corey, who would later be replaced by Jake Thomas. 5 writers were tapped to figure out the story: Tom Waltz, Paul Aller, Sophie Campbell, Caleb Gollner, and Eric Burnham. The big multi-dimensional event ultimately didn't happen as envisioned, and it became the Battle Nexus miniseries. It was initially promoted as a 5-week event scheduled for November 2025. But the creative team couldn't go that fast, and the event became bi-weekly, with a different scripter and artist in charge of each issue. The first issue was scripted by Tom Waltz, with art by Esau and Isaac Escorza. The second issue was scripted by Paul Aller, with art by Ben Bishop. The third issue was scripted by Sophie Campbell, with art by Vitor Kafashi. The fourth issue was scripted by Caleb Gollner, with art by Omar Francia. And the last issue was scripted by Eric Burnham, with art and some colors by Ben Bates. Across all issues, colors were made by Luis Antonio Delgado and letters by Tom Napolitano. As I mentioned, Eric was given a 1-page backup feature for his Mr. Ogg story. This was when Saturday Morning Adventures editor Tia Chewik got involved. Eric asked Sarah Meyer to turn his 1-page into a Sunday comic strip format, so it would look like a double splash page. The idea of the 1-pager fights came from Nickelodeon's Jeff Whitman, and it was probably the most challenging aspect of the whole event. Eric had to introduce 8 characters who had to fight each other on 1 page, with 1 team declared the winner. After receiving the approved list of iterations that could fight each other, Eric had to determine which sets would face off. It made sense to him to pit the Turtles from the first movie against the ones from the most recent one. The Archie Turtles were pitted against the 1987 set because they were supposed to be the same, and perhaps that was why the joke was that they ended in a tie. The confrontation between the 2003 and 2012 Turtles was already decided by Nickelodeon, which only left 2 other sets, Rise and Mirage. This last one still worked well because of the huge contrast between the grim and gritty Turtles and the more superpowered set. One of the biggest surprises of this saga is the reintroduction of Ninjara. Writers had been trying for 15 years to bring her into the IDW continuity, without much luck. It's not clear why, but it seemed Nickelodeon wasn't sure whether they owned the character. 2 of those writers were Eric Burnham and Sophie Campbell. By then, Nickelodeon already knew they could use her, but they asked not to do it yet, clearly expecting to use her in this event. But she wasn't the only character they had in mind. According to Tom Waltz, bringing back Slash was another request from Nickelodeon, and they proposed doing it in a Planet Hulk style. Knowing Nickelodeon wanted to use a metalhead, Paul Aller chose the 2012 version because Donnie's relationship with him was so different in that show compared to his IDW counterpart. Another surprise was the use of the Last Ronin in the backup feature. But this and the old turtle in the main story were different characters. The one in the main story is called Old Man Mikey, and they were going to do a 3-parter with him in the Saturday Morning Adventures comic until they had to change directions. He will be seen again in a smaller capacity, and they're working on it now. Let's go through some other interesting facts about this comic. While all issues had alternate covers by many artists, Issues 2 to 5 had alternate covers depicting the two sets of turtles fighting each other in that issue's backup feature. The choice of artists was also influenced by those familiar with those iterations. In issue 2, Dan Schoening did the live-action Turtles, and Louis Joyce and Luis Antonio Delgado did the Tails Turtles. For issue 3, Mirage veteran Jim Lawson did the original Turtles, and Andy Siriano did the Rise Turtles. Issue 4 featured Dan Schoening and Luis Antonio Delgado on the 1987 Turtles, while Ken Mitroni and Heather Breckel handled the Archie Turtles. In issue 5, Kerry Randolph and Emilio Lopez did the 2003 Turtles, and Ciro Nieli did the 2012 set. While this is most likely a coincidence, the IDW Turtles met counterparts from the Rise, 2003, and Archie universes, three sets of Turtles that likely lost their matches on the parallel OG tournament. Another interesting fact was that the Dimensional Council members were the same as in the 2014 annual, except for Council leader Nieli. Gage, as he was named in the annual, was revealed to be the 2003 Daimyo. And since that part of the story was in black and white, it allowed writers to turn one of them into an actual black and white character, which was brilliant. Of course, at the time, neither Big Mama nor Mr. Og would have made sense as council members. In the wrong hands, an event like this could have felt shallow, but I found the matches quite engaging. Raph and Mikey's fights in particular were a highlight for me. Perhaps the only champion I didn't feel was necessary to have was the original Shredder. Interestingly enough, he was absorbed by the fissure at the end of the story, so what does this mean for the original universe if Shredder didn't go back to die and be fed to the worms? Did Lord Simultaneous eventually fix this inconsistency? Or would this event end up creating a new Mirage spin-off timeline where the Shredder stayed dead? And speaking of inconsistencies, if you were looking for answers as to why each battle Nexus in the Turtleverse looked different, the answer wasn't in this story. However, I do feel like there is now more room for expanding the concept. Perhaps the many different Battle Nexus tournaments are the results of the council members taking turns to host them. Another fascinating addition to the lore was the idea that doppelgangers could drive each other insane simply by being in each other's presence. This wasn't exactly a rule in the Mirage universe, but it could explain why the 1987 Turtles always seemed to be out of character in their interactions in Turtles Forever and the 2012 cartoon. I also found it interesting that the sets of Turtles that had already met didn't cross each other's paths, except for 2003 and Mirage off-panel. I assume this was done to avoid references to those adventures. In fact, the story took a similar approach to the one used in the Olympics. They brought just one turtle from each iteration to pair them with each IDW turtle. The fourth one is Old Man Mikey from the 1987 and Saturday Morning Adventures universe. There were Easter eggs for other turtles in this story, like the 2007 and Michael Bay Turtles. But these were mere flashbacks, and it's unclear which turtles, aside from 2003 Leo, fought the original Shredder. My guess is that one Leo didn't fight him, and that would be the Mutant Mayhem one, since they haven't met their Shredder yet. Overall, I found Battle Nexus to be a fun experience, and it left me wanting more Turtleverse from IDW. Perhaps an anthology book, iterating through the versions without a comic at the moment. Maybe even teaming up turtles from different universes, even if it could only happen for a short time. What do you think? Would you buy that comic? What would you like as a follow-up to this story? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the sewers.